Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 104 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. We are here on a cool November evening, the eve of Thanksgiving. I'm down here in the Vomitorium South, the bunker, with my good friend and fabulous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing well, but you made the mistake I made last week. You didn't even say your own name.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What is it again?
You are Dr. David Noe.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thanks. There we go.
Now that we have that straight, I'm feeling good tonight.
Excellent.
Yep. Like we had a little bit of a break from the torrential downpour of snow that we had. Yeah.
25 inches.
Is that what it was?
Or as they say in Canada, 63 and a half centimeters. Yes.
Yeah.
Record snowfall. We were only bested here in the Midwest by the Buffalonians.
It's worse in Buffalo right now?
Did you know they got over 3 feet of snow?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, they can't dig out at all.
Wow. Man, I did not hear that. I didn't even hear that. 25 inches. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad.
I hear the mayor of Buffalo released a whole pack of St. Bernards. They're just crawling around the neighborhood with their little barrels underneath.
Those are the casts on their collars, right?
With a little, what is it, gin or something in there to revive the
warm
frozen?
You up.
Right.
Yeah. If Warner Brothers cartoons taught me anything,
they've taught me practically everything I know.
That's right.
So there we go. So what are we doing this evening?
I have no idea.
Oh, come on.
The truth, right. We're doing something topical, seasonal.
Thanksgiving-ish.
Excellent. Yeah.
And I rarely say this because you know how I feel about the E word.
Yes.
I'm excited about this episode.
You are.
Very much.
That almost never happens.
I know. Yeah. I'm a consistent meh, as we learned a couple episodes ago.
Or if you are excited, it's usually tempered with some you're lowering expectations.
That's correct.
Right? But you're feeling above the bar tonight?
That's correct.
All right.
I'm excited by this. I've muscled up above the bar because this is epic, but in quite a different strain than what we've been dealing with thus far with Virgil.
Okay. Yeah, this is very true.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at one of the first epic poems that's describing the newly discovered continent from the perspective of Europeans, of course, of North America.
Excellent.
And Nova Anglia in particular, New England.
Okay.
And I think there's so much richness in this little poem that we may actually have to devote 2 episodes to it.
Really?
I don't know. We'll just see how it goes.
See how far we get tonight?
Right.
So this is an epic poem about New England?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating read. Listener, Jeff's pretending here that he hasn't done any of his homework.
I have done nothing. Right. This is Dave's episode.
Well, we'll see about that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So first we have to get through some corrigenda.
We do?
Yes.
Who screwed up?
Well, I did mostly.
Okay.
But mostly you.
Okay.
So the first one is, I was trying to quote that line because it was snowing, remember?
Yeah.
That line from the famous poem, The Night Before Christmas?
Right.
And I think what I said was, the moon on the crust of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midnight to objects below.
And that's not quite right.
That's 0 for 2.
Oh, really?
I was wrong on 2 counts.
What is it?
It's the moon on the crest of the new fallen snow. And I think I can be forgiven for that one. Gave the luster of midday. And, I was kind of bothered by it even when I said it because I don't think midnight has any luster.
No, it's lusterless.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
It's a lackluster.
The idea is the bright moon kind of gives the semblance of midday in the dead of night.
To objects below.
Yes.
It's told from the perspective of Santa Claus.
Okay.
So if you like that poem, The Night Before Christmas, or 'Twas the Night Before Christmas to get the first name in, the praenomen, that's the correct rendering.
Gotcha. Right. Now, this reminded me of a meme my oldest son sent me today, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about this is going to be a Thanksgiving themed episode.
Okay. He was in on it.
But we're already talking about Christmas.
Yes.
And so this is about, how stores, like after Halloween, they shove out the Christmas stuff, and Thanksgiving kind of gets lost.
Right.
It's not a very commercial holiday.
You
right?
can't do much with Thanksgiving.
No.
There isn't an undertone of avarice.
You don't send a Thanksgiving Day card to family
You don't?
and friends. Well, I don't.
Okay.
I once got one from a realtor we used, which I thought was really weird, right?
Or the dentist.
Oh, yeah.
If you get one of those from the dentist.
The dentist or your
Thanksgiving Day card.
Your financial guy, right?
Got some turkey stuck in there.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
But this meme that my son sent me, there was a big inflatable turkey that was sitting on a prone Santa Claus with a sign in his hand that said, "Wait your turn, fat boy." And I like that.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
so
just the right amount of edge.
exactly.
Okay.
Oh, and another corrigendum we have?
That's correct.
Okay.
This is the bust of Thalia. Remember, we were talking last time about the Muses because that was apropos of Book 7 of the Iliad, the beginning.
That's right.
And I was mentioning this marble bust of Thalia, the Muse of Comedy, and how beautiful this particular bust is. And you asked me, Dave, where is it?
Where is it?
And I had almost no information about it.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is so much counts as a corrigendum as it is filling a lacuna.
Gotcha. Okay.
Do you remember when you first learned the word lacuna when you were in grad school?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It was fascinating.
Right. And I remember it was in a class where I realized the lacuna in much of my undergraduate education.
Right. There's all gaping holes.
There's huge gaping holes.
Right. Someone fill these, right? And then we rejoiced. It was kind of like a lacuna matata, right?
Oh, very nicely done.
So this particular bust is in the Vatican Museum. That's where I've seen it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have seen it there as well.
I'm sure. Now, do you know which room it's in? Because, how many...
Now, Jeff, why'd you have to ask that? Because now I got to go look that up.
Right.
And next week, I got to bring back another corrigendum.
Well, you know how that museum is. It's a hall of heads after hall of heads.
Yeah, some parts of it are even blocked off as though just to kind of taunt you by saying, look, we have so much stuff, we don't even have to show you most of it.
Exactly, right. We can put up a couple of orange cones here.
That's
and
correct.
Just say,
keep out.
Yeah, keep out.
Yep. So it is the reproduction of a 2nd century Roman original that resembles Greek models of the late 4th to early 3rd century BC. And so it was most likely bronze. And then, of course, the Romans copied it in marble. Yeah. And now we have this replica. Very nice.
It's very. You have, of course, the listener can't see this, but the reproduction you have on the sheet here, it's a very lovely statue.
It is, isn't it?
It's very nice.
You'd expect the the statue of Thalia Comedy to be winsome, I think.
And yes,
who doesn't like to laugh?
She looks a little too composed to be a muse of comedy.
Maybe so, but notice the tiny little smile that's playing about her lips. Do you see that?
I do.
Yeah, she's about to say something funny, I think.
I can see that.
Or inspire someone else. Third corrigendum.
What do we got?
Yeah, so someday the episode is just going to be entirely corrigenda, right? I said that the preferred term in Latin for pizza.
Yeah.
First I said I used to call it panis neapolitanus.
Yeah.
Right, which is Naples bread.
Right.
Just like a bagel is sometimes called panis judaicus.
Oh, the
Jewish bread,
yeah.
Right. And then I said, no, it's actually placentia. That was wrong too.
Okay.
It's placenta.
Placenta. Okay.
Placenta neapolitana.
Placenta.
Yep. I was off by a single letter.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Not too bad.
What is it? The placenta, I'm not even, where's that even coming from?
It's a large flat thing, basically.
Okay.
That's the idea. All right, so now we're on to the shout out.
Oh man, what a shout out this
goodness. This comes from one Thomas Flynn. And apparently not only is this a shout out, but it's a little bit of a bone to pick. Why don't you read the first part, please?
Yes, umbrage was taken.
Yes.
So he writes, imagine my horror when I heard you say in the latest episode that you have no shout out.
Wait, can you read the part in parentheses too? Because this was a little bit unnerving.
When I heard you say in the latest episode, number 103 at 5 minutes 56 seconds.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed that he didn't include like a fraction of a second. Come on, Thomas, be precise.
Right.
And then I realized, people are out there writing things down.
Man, yeah, exactly.
That's a frightening.
That is a frightening idea. Could it be that the following email, most of which I already sent on the 26th of September, has disappeared?
Yes.
So he had sent us
a
couple of months ago.
And I'd like to blame you. I think you forgot this one.
This is probably true.
No.
Yeah.
We already know that he's not an Americano because he puts the number before the month.
Right.
On 26 September.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'm looking. I mean, he's an Aussie, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of these references to didgeridoos and the band Men at Work. It's
the baby eating your dingo and so forth.
That's right.
But this is an incredible shout out. Could you read the first paragraph?
Yes. It says, I have been listening to your podcast since episode 14. So he apparently skipped 1 through 13.
I don't know.
I have a little bone to pick with Thomas.
Okay.
Right.
Cicero Falls at Formiae. That's number 14.
Yep.
December 7. It was released December 7 of 2020.
Yes. He says, I quickly caught up on all the previous ones. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. I did enjoy the Odyssey episodes, but my favorite has been episode 89, Dirges for Dead Dido.
Interesting.
I look forward to a future episode or 2 or 3 on Apuleius. Now this guy's talking my language.
Yeah, he's buttering you up.
He is. I am probably never going to read his Metamorphoses. What? But I do wonder the extent to which the narrator's religious experience is meant to be taken seriously.
That's a good question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
In fact, I especially like the episodes on classical topics I know nothing about. I devoted a whole chapter of my dissertation on the seriousness of Apuleius's take on religion.
Fascinating. We'll have to take a look at that.
You want to pick it up?
And Thomas says, I started classical languages at school when I was 10. Wow, I admire that. Read classics at Oxford.
Wow.
And for one reason and another moved to Sydney more than 15 years ago, where I now teach Latin and Greek at Campion College, named after the great Latinist, praised as such by Elizabeth, and martyr Saint Edmund Campion. I like this guy.
I think so. I don't think he's an Aussie by birth. I think it sounds like he might be a Brit and then moved to Australia.
Anybody that can't spell theater, right? TRE.
Yeah, right.
I lump them all together.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Up in Canada, they can't either. If I had my druthers and I had to do classics, I would spend all my working days reading Homer and Plato. That's great.
Man.
So I am definitely more on the Greek side, he says, but I teach Latin, which is definitely more popular. Isn't that nice? I want to go on to just one more thing here.
Yeah.
He says, at some point, Dave suggested that Thomas Aquinas' Latin is serviceable, but not elegant.
Did you say that?
I think I insisted. I don't think I just suggested. I think I was quite clear.
Right.
That Aquinas' Latin is perfect for what it needs to do, what it seeks to do.
Yeah.
But it has no beauty or charm that we should desire it.
Okay.
And he says, may I suggest Aquinas' hymn to the Blessed Sacrament, composed for the office of Corpus Christi. And then he gives us a lot of additional helpful immaterial. I would say, how many pages here, Jeff? Shuffle the pages a little bit.
Man, it goes on.
Right.
It goes on. And alas, we don't have time to address it all.
We don't.
But
you were saying,
yeah,
right, that he includes some excellent ideas for future topics.
Yes, I like it. It's a nice variety of ideas, of corners of the classics. He suggests, why not tackle the odder corners of Euripides?
Right.
His Ion, his Helen, his Orestes.
Isn't that sharp?
That's a great idea.
Here's another good one.
Yep.
The Language of Augustine's Conversion, Confessions, Book 8. I like that.
That'd be great.
Very much. And Thomas, I think we must say this is probably a little bit, reckless. He suggests that we tackle the movie Gladiator versus history.
Yeah.
And I say it's reckless because we tried that with the movie Troy, more bods than gods, and it was kind of a dud.
But you know what? I think he might be onto something, though, because I think infinitely more people have seen Gladiator than they saw Troy.
You really think so?
I do, without a doubt, right?
All right.
And I think there's a lot to talk about there. Some interesting stuff. Yep.
Well, so to wrap this up, thank you, Thomas, for listening. Thanks for carrying the torch aloft there, way down under, in your teaching of Latin and Greek. Thank you for the excellent ideas you've provided us with for future topics.
We will steal them shamelessly.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Let's get down to what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
And so we're talking this. You mentioned at the top of the episode this lengthy epic poem.
Correct.
Written about New England. And who's our author here, and what do we know about him?
The gentleman's name is William Morrell, and he was born sometime after 1590, and he died sometime after 1626.
So he did not live a very long life.
No, he did not,
okay.
Right? So this is sometime late 16th, early 17th century. Received his Bachelor of Arts from Magdalen College in Cambridge, 15, excuse me. So not like our friend Thomas Flynn, who went to Oxford. This guy's a Cambridge man.
Okay.
May 23rd and 24th, 1619, Morrell was ordained as a deacon and priest at Peterborough. And in 1623, after receiving a commission by the ecclesiastical court to oversee and administer any churches which already or might be instituted in the new colonies, Morrell accompanied the English Navy captain Robert Georges to New England, who was tasked with assisting the establishment of the short-lived Wessagusset Colony in present-day Weymouth.
Weymouth, is that in Massachusetts?
Massachusetts,
okay.
Yep. The colony was abandoned in the next year, the spring of 1624, due to financial difficulties and tensions with the natives. Robert Georges served as Governor General of New England between 1623 and 1624, and Georges returned to England in 1624, but Morrell remained behind in Plymouth for one more year to learn more about New England. So that's our author, William Morrell.
Okay.
These two poems are the fruits of his observations. They were published in 1625, so just a year later, by John Dawson. These writings make it clear that Morrell was an able classical scholar. He frequently peppers his English with Latin maxims reminiscent of Virgil and Apuleius, And he employs numerous references to classical mythological figures and events.
Very interesting.
And I also found, and I'm sure that the author whom we're quoting, a man named Andrew Gaudio, who put this together. It's freely available online. It's published by the Library of Congress, June 2019. Gaudio noticed some of these Virgilian and Appuleian references. I caught a couple of Lucretius as I was going through it, for sure. Yep. And likely some Ovid as well.
Excellent, great.
So that's the guy.
Okay, and so you note here on the notes here the front plate,
right?
Of the this is something added by Gaudio, or this is something from Morrell?
I think it's Morrell.
Okay,
yep.
All right.
And it's the Latin expression "sat breve, si sat bene," which means it's good enough if it's short enough.
Oh, I like that.
Basically,
it's kind of another of the big book, big evil.
That's correct.
Maxim of the from the Callimachus.
Callimachus and the Alexandrians.
There
right?
we go. Yeah.
So the whole title of this work is New England, or a Brief Narration. That's a word that might need some definition. So we're familiar with narration, but there's another Latin word, enarro, which means to tell completely, right?
Okay.
So there used to be an English word, narration. I'm sure that we don't use that very often.
No.
Have you used that one today?
I've never used that word in my life.
See if you can drop that on Thanksgiving.
I will do that. I don't want to stir up trouble around the table, though. Got to keep the peace.
A brief narration of the air, earth, water, fish, and fowls of that country, with a description of the natures, orders, habits, and religion of the natives, in Latin and English verse. London, 1625, William Morrell.
All right, now, being a translator of works from you've done a lot of translating of works from around this era.
That's right,
and slightly before. And this is an era of Latin I know very little about. Mm-hmm. So, is this a fairly typical kind of thing that people were writing?
Oh, yes.
Who would have been the audience for something like this?
Right. Well, that's a little harder to know for sure.
Well, I mean, is it coming from? So he's writing this a couple of years after the arrival of the Mayflower, right?
Correct.
1620.
Yep.
And so maybe he's tapping into kind of this fascination with this strange new world.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Right. And the ongoing British effort to colonize, this part of the continent called New England.
Yeah.
And when was Jamestown? 1607, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
Right. So it's only been a couple of decades that there has been a consistent, sustained English presence on this continent. And so typical education of the time for a guy like Morrell, start Latin when you're 10, 11 years old and study really nothing but Latin and Greek for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Just in great depth. Starting out with prose. Once you've learned some basics of grammar, with a bunch of other boys your age, being punished if you make mistakes. Typically harshly. Then you'd read prose, Terence, Plautus, a little bit of Plautus, but mostly Terence and Caesar. Then you'd graduate to Cicero. And then when you had read enough Cicero, you could write poetry. And then you were expected to compose couplets. And there were a lot of helps, a lot of books and a lot of shortcuts and dictionaries and such that would help you learn how to construe in hexameter primarily, which is Virgil's meter, as we know.
Right.
Construe things into Latin poetry.
Very interesting.
And so there's a lot of stuff like this.
Okay.
Translations from Greek into Latin prose and especially poetry. So this is a poem in dactylic hexameter, quoting Gaudio again, with an accompanying English translation in heroic verse. We're doing this on this episode because it stands as the earliest surviving work of poetry about New England and the second oldest poem whose origins can be traced directly to the British American colonies.
Wow.
So only 2 copies of this original edition are known to survive. One is held at the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. Have you been there?
I have, yes.
I have not.
Yeah.
I have not.
Impressive, yeah. You need to get there.
Well, I have some friends that live in Pasadena. I'm quite sure they're listening, and they keep telling me, come out here, we'll take you to the Huntington Library.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what's stopping you?
I don't know. So I got to do this podcast. Yeah. So that's where one copy is, and the other copy, of course, is housed in the British Museum.
Okay.
So the Latin portion is 309 lines, so it's short, right?
Right.
You could call it almost an epilion, a mini epic.
That sounds in some ways the opposite of an narration. If an narration means to promise to do it all,
you're right.
This is just a few pages.
Yeah, 309 lines. I mean, still quite a bit of effort. I guess the shortest book of the Aeneid is still over 600 lines.
Right.
So that's a pretty good chunk here.
Okay. Maybe Morrell just discovered that he couldn't quite squeeze out enough epic lines about beavers and deer. And
You're anticipating where we're headed soon.
okay,
Right. Right. And as Gaudio says, just to wrap this part up, it praises the geographic features, the flora and the fauna of New England, and spends a majority of its verses describing the Native Americans with awe and curiosity.
Fantastic.
And that's really interesting, as we'll see when we get into it. There has been a lot of talk in the last 20 to 30 years about the European exploitation of Native Americans, or Indians as they were once called. And there's obviously a lot of truth to that.
Right.
The people who arrived here were not saints.
No.
But the people who were here were not saints either.
Right.
It's a mix of human beings. But I was really struck by the way Morrell describes the Native Americans that he encountered, whom he calls Indians, right? And how much almost reverence he has for them.
Do you want to jump to that, or you want to wait?
Well, I think we should kind of take it through. We should kind of take it through a little bit at a time.
Okay. All right.
So, Jeff, there's a little bit of a preview, right, that comes before the beginning of the Latin portion of the poem, entitled "Understanding Reader."
Yes, and this is written by Morrell himself.
That's right, in English.
Yes.
And I think this is really charming. Can you read some of that?
I can. And so, listener, bear with me, because the script here has that odd to my eyes thing, 17th century English,
right,
where the S can look like an F.
That's correct.
Right. So if I flub that, that's what's going on here.
And vice versa.
Right. So Morrell writes, when my melancholy leisures first conceived these rude heroics, my conscious muse censured them, too tender-sighted to be admitted to the common light.
Isn't that a great line?
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. My melancholy leisures. I just imagine Morrell, he's kind of tramping around New England.
Yeah.
A little bit bored, right? He's got nothing to do, and he thought, I should write some poetry, right? But he modestly calls them rude heroics.
Yes. No, he says here, my conscious muse censured them, too tender-sighted to be admitted to the common light.
Yeah.
So it's like the muse is holding him back at first, or
yes, his conscious muse, right? What he thought about, his own sense of criticism.
Okay.
And I think tender-sighted here is used in an old-fashioned meaning to mean that they can't bear up to other people's scrutiny.
I see.
In other words, when other people look at them, they'll be damaged because they're weak.
Gotcha.
So not tender-sighted in that they look at things tenderly, but when you look at them, they're fragile.
Gotcha. All right, he goes on. Induced by some kind friends who are truly studious of the public good, I was unwillingly willing. I like that. I was unwillingly willing to adventure them the public censure, desirous, I ingeniously confess, and so I profess myself ever, in my best endeavors to further such royal and religious employments, if my poor judgment can assuredly observe piety to be one prime end of plantation, and the undertaking probable to prosper. I got to admit, he lost me about halfway through there.
Right. I really love the I was unwillingly willing.
Right.
Yeah, I underlined that.
So he had some friends who said, no, you got to do this.
Right.
Okay.
And he didn't really want to, but he eventually gave in.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
To adventure them the public censure. Right. All right. So I'll publish them. I'll put this poem out. We'll see what happens. I was desirous. I ingeniously confess. And I think ingeniously here means not like that's an ingenious idea, but I candidly, right? I think what it means. And so I profess myself ever in my best endeavors to further such royal and religious employments. So, yeah. And then I like the way that he butters up the reader here.
Okay.
This is an affectation that's not used much anymore, but he first calls us understanding reader, and then he says, if, gentle reader, these lines please thee, peruse and use us gently. If not, parcavati. Right?
So that's our first Latin here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Spare the poet, cut me a break. Yeah. You want to go on there?
Yeah. It's a couple of things strike me here. One that strikes me as in many ways very British.
Yes.
Just kind of like downplaying, downplaying, but kind of advertising your genius, but but downplaying at the same time.
Right. Using really big words to say that you're a total ignoramus.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, right. And this also, it reminds me very much of the prologue to Appius' Metamorphoses.
Oh, does it?
Where Appius himself is basically kind of raising hopes, but also basically saying, don't expect too much, right? And you might, he says something at one point, you're going to ask yourself, who is that speaking? Like, who is this annoying person buzzing in my ear? And then here too is like, if you choose to read this, be gentle, right? Yeah, just forgive the poet.
Right. So, I like that.
So that ex quolibet ligno non fit mercurius, more Latin.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
From any old block of wood, you can't get a mercury.
Gotcha. You can't get blood from a stone?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So you can't just choose any old stump and fashion it into a statue of Mercury. It's not going to work. So he's, in this metaphor, right, he's the block of wood, so don't expect anything great to emerge.
Gotcha. Right. So I'm sure there's a poetic name for this device where you raise expectations by lowering them. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it reminds me of the dear reader, I'm not going to talk about, and then you mention all these things that you talk about. The praeteritio, right. So he goes on. Besides, error in poetry, is less blemished than in history. Experience cannot plead me ignorant, much less innocent, having seen and suffered.
I like that. That's a good sentiment, isn't it?
It is.
If you make a mistake in error in poetry, right, it's not as bad as making one in history. Mm-hmm. Because if you've actually experienced and seen things, seen and suffered, you got to get your facts right.
Right.
But there's more latitude in poetry because it's more subjective and interpretive.
Yes.
At least that's how I take it.
Yeah, no, I hear that too. Mm-hmm. I should delude others, wanna spay with false hope, vain hope, or falso gaudio.
Yeah.
Yes.
Disappointing happiness, fake joy. Yep. What can be expected from false relations but unhappy proceedings? To the best intended and most hopeful colonies. And then maybe just this last one here. So that want of provisions and right information begets in the distracted planter nothing but mutinies, fearful execrations, and sometimes miserable interritures.
Sounds terrifying. My goodness.
Yeah. But he uses such great language. So,
all right. Well, I'm eager to see the poem that that has been set up, has been buttered up so nicely here.
That's correct. And he signs it at the end, thine, if thy own, W.M.
All right.
William Morrell.
Okay. All right. So then Morrell begins not with a poem proper, but it's a note to the reader. Lectori.
That's correct.
All right.
Yep.
You want to, and this is hexameter verse?
It's,
or is this
I think
this
it's
different?
couplets.
It's couplets. Okay.
Yeah. So it's an elegiac couplet.
Okay.
One line of hexameter and then a pentameter.
There you go. Okay.
The double hemiepes.
You want to read some Latin there?
I would love to because this is pretty good Latin. It scans nicely.
Okay.
So here we go. Candida si placadum deteris philo musa comoinae, intuitum tristi, duca levamen erit, optima me lifluis modulari carmina nervis, illida pa lineis, cantibus eoge melos, melea coeles stest e fundera carmina munus, frustra de sico, pumica quaeris aquam, dicere musa probe brebeter similordina purga, gloria summa tibi dicere vera vale.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm back in Ovid's Ars Amatoria.
Yes, right. But remember, this was written published in 1625.
Okay, now how does this Latin compare to Aquinas's?
Sorry, Thomas, don't get me started.
So that Thomas couldn't have pulled this off?
No, I mean Thomas Flynn, our shout
yes.
outie.
Okay, yes, okay.
If Thomas Aquinas could pull this off, he never did.
He never did.
So I don't know. But this is good. And I tend to think, as I read through it, I didn't read every line of the Latin, all 309. I probably read maybe a third or so. Some of the lines of hexameter are fluid and perfect. Others, and maybe we'll look at a couple, they're a little clunky.
Okay.
But it's so, I don't know if I could write one hexameter line. This guy put together 309, but these 8 lines of the To the Reader, this is really good.
Yeah.
So I think he probably labored over this, maybe more than some of the other lines. knowing that this is the first thing people are going to read.
Right. You wanna lead with your best foot.
That's right. Could you read the translation that Morrell himself has provided?
So I was just going to ask. So this is Morrell's own translation of his work. Okay,
yep, that's my understanding.
All right. So he translates those lines. Thusly, if thou, Apollo, holdst thy scepter forth, to these harsh number, that's thy royal worth. Vain is all search in these to search that vein, whose stately style is great Apollo's strain. Minerva ne'er distilled into my muse her sacred drops. My pumice wants all use.
Juice.
Is it juice?
I think so.
Juice wants all juice. My pumice wants all juice.
Yeah. So pumice, right, is the stone that you use to scrape away an error in on parchment or on papyrus, I suppose. This is like the labor limae, right, that Catullus is talking about.
Okay.
My pumice wants all juice. I guess it means he just keeps erasing and erasing.
Again, is this kind of a humble brag?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
My muse is plain, concise, her fames to tell. In truth and method, love or leave, farewell.
Right.
So are these? I mean, I kind of stepped on the rhythm of it, but
I don't think so.
They're iambics, right? Yeah.
Yes.
My muse is plain, concise, her fames to tell.
Right.
In truth and method, love or leave, farewell.
Yeah.
Do.
They're rhyming iambs, right?
Yeah.
And eight lines to represent the 8 lines of the couplets, right?
There you go.
So it's not easy to do.
It is not.
And I think he's done pretty well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dig into should we get into the main course here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So line 1. Do you want to read some of the hexameter?
Yes, I do.
All right. The title, Nova Anglia.
Nova Anglia.
Right? New England.
New England. He's talking about Massachusetts was where he kind of landed and spent his time.
Plymouth Rock.
All right. Hactenis igno tam populisego carmine primos. Te no adevete requi contigit Anglia nomen. Agredior trepidus pingui celebrare Minerva. Fermihi numen opem cupienti singula pectro. Pondera veridico quae nuper vidimus ipsi.
Very nicely done, Jeff.
Thank you.
Very nice. Very sonorous.
Yes.
So here's how it goes. Here is the English. And, for the first time in how many episodes?
Yeah.
I'm not saying, or you're not saying, here's the Lombardo.
Yeah.
This is Morrell himself.
This is Morrell on Morrell.
That's correct.
All right.
Fear not, poor muse, cause first to sing her fame. That's yet scarce known, unless by map or name. A grandchild to earth's paradise is born, well-limbed, well-nerved, fair, rich, sweet, yet forlorn. Thou blessed director, so direct my verse, that it may win her people, friends, commerce. Whilst her sweet air, rich soil, blessed seas my pen, shall blaze and tell the natures of her men.
That's so nice.
It's pretty good English poetry, isn't it?
It is. It's not bad at all. Right.
I like it quite a bit.
Right. And I mean, it's definitely playing into the curiosity back home about this new untouched land, right?
That's right.
Definitely the language here is very kind of golden age, right? It's untouched.
Right.
It's what he says, a grandchild to Earth's paradise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I really like it. And scarce known unless by map or name. Mm-hmm. So, it tells us that people in England, they could see the circulating maps. They had heard about it. It's just kind of like a whisper, kind of like a rumor. This place, New England.
Right. But I think I also sense kind of a bit of the, maybe not, tragedy isn't the right word, but the idea that stepping into this kind of untouched paradise and this unsullied golden age, and calling it New England it's now forever changed.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You can never go back to its pristineness, right?
It's imperialism, right? Imperialism has come to the continent, right? And the English, like the other European empires, will wreak havoc on a lot of it. I think do some good things as well, but it's definitely never going to be the same, right? Like that great scene in the movie Apocalypto. Have you seen that movie?
Apocalypto?
Yeah.
No, I mean the title itself.
Hold on, okay. What? You haven't seen it?
I have not seen it.
Oh, let's pause. Let's write this down. On this day, like Thomas Flynn takes notes, on this day, we found a movie that Winkle hasn't seen.
That's right. And that you have seen this?
Of course I have seen it.
I probably saw that title, and
it steered you away?
Well, I mean, they took apocalypse and kind of put an O on the end. It's like Racco.
All right. So it's a 2006 movie. It's described as an epic horror adventure film, which sounds right up your alley.
It does sound something I'd like, yeah.
Right. So it's about conflict among the Mayans with some of the indigenous peoples, other indigenous peoples in the 16th century.
Does it purport
late 15th, early 16th century?
Does it purport to tell a true story, or is it?
It does. I don't know how much criticism it received, how much liberty was taken, but it purports to tell a true story.
Okay.
And right at the very end, when all the conflict is resolved, or the consequences of bad behavior played out, one of the last scenes are 3 Spanish ships drifting into the harbor near the Mayan peoples and their various allies and enemies.
It's there goes the neighborhood.
Exactly. And the idea is, like you were saying, this changes everything.
Right.
For good and bad.
Yes.
Right. This is it. This is a monumental change.
It's that classic clash between civilization and nature.
Right.
And both how both of them kind of carry within them kind of beautiful, wonderful things, but also savagery.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's important to remember, and I'm sure this is what you meant, the Spanish don't merely represent civilization. They represent brutality.
Right.
And the Mayans are a mix of civilization and brutality as well.
Right, exactly.
And that's a point that the movie makes really brilliantly.
So you'd recommend it?
It's grim. Oh, it's so bloody.
Does Mel play a Mayan?
He's not in it at all.
Oh, he
just directed
the film. Gotcha.
Yeah, I had to watch much. I have, kind of the tender conscience. I had to watch much of it through my eyes because it's brutal.
Really? Gory?
Oh, yeah. Horribly. I mean, because it purports to show human sacrifice and things. But the story is a good one.
Yes.
Anyway, a little off course maybe, but if we can pick up here a little bit at the beginning, and Morrell says, a royal work, well worthy England's king, these natives to true truth and grace to bring. A noble work for all these noble peers, which guide the state in their superior spheres. You holy errands, let your censors near, cease burning till these men Jehovah fear.
Okay, so bring in the gospel.
Right,
okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. These natives to true truth and grace to bring. So remember, Morrell was a priest, right? And he's calling upon, part of his purpose in writing this is to try to rally his fellow Englishmen to engage in their, as they saw it, God-ordained task of bringing Christianity to this new continent.
Right. Okay.
And what's interesting to me about this is, of course, the poetic art, right? Poetica ars, something like that, est non omnia dicere, is you don't say everything, right? You just allude to things. So here, instead of saying explicitly, you English Christians, get over here, right? He expresses it poetically.
Yes.
First in Latin, then in English. He calls them holy errands. Let your censors ne'er cease burning, right?
So Morrell is to distinguish him from other colonial peoples. He was not a Puritan fleeing a type of persecution from back home.
No.
And he kind of freely comes of his own accord, but still sees kind of the duty of his civilized country to spread the civilized religion.
That's correct. Okay. Christianity.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let's get into some of Morrell's description of the flora and fauna.
I like that.
Nova Anglia. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So these are the Latin lines. I'm going to read just a few because it's just goes on and on brilliantly, and then maybe you can read some of Morrell's translation.
Sure.
So he says, "His nucleis laute versutus vesceter indus, his exempta fame segnis nostratibus omni, dulcibus his vir res revocantur victibus almae, arboribus di ves vernantibus est quoquitellus, cadris et fagis uglandibus et iovis alta, arbora fraxinea gomosis pinibus alnis, uniparis multis quali istum grammar et herbis, pascua quae prebent animalibus unde fugaces." That's the end, pretty much, of the description of the flora.
Yes.
I mean, one part, and then we're going to get a long, fascinating description of some of the fauna.
Right.
Could you read some of the translation there so that people know what we're talking about?
Sure. "A groundnut there runs on a grassy thread, along the shallow earth as in a bed, yellow without, thin filmed, sweet lily white, of strength to feed and cheer the appetite. From these our natures may have great content, and good substance when our means is spent. With these the natives do their strength maintain, the winter season, which time they retain, their pleasant virtue, but if once the spring return, they are not worth the gathering. All o'er that main the verdant trees abound, where cedar, cypress, spruce, and beech are found, ash, oak, and walnut, pines, and juniper, the hazel, palm, and 100 more are there. It goes on. And then that's followed up with the list of all the animals.
The list of all the animals,
Yeah.
right. I think this is so charming. For example, when he's describing these trees, the cedars and the cypress, the spruce and the beech, he mentions the tall tree of Jupiter, right? Mm-hmm. The Yoasalta arbora, and then all of the different plants, all of which are, both accurate and they perfectly fit the hexameter line.
Right.
There's no small accomplishment.
Yeah. And I even see in this a bit of that eye for the natural world is you see Darwin, a century or two later comes around and I mean, not a poet,
right?
But deeply interested in the intricacies of the natural world. It's already here in an English predecessor.
Yep. And of course, as the learned listener knows, the names of all of these trees, because they went back and listened to Cowboy Up Verge.
Oh, of course they did.
The Virgilian Eclogue and Augustan literature. Mm-hmm. That was pretty early, like 19, something like 17, something like that. Filled with the names of trees.
That's right.
Filled with trees. The eclogues are stuffed with trees.
Yeah.
Speaking of stuffed with trees.
Is it time?
It's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, been in business for 50 years. I think officially this year, this is their 50th anniversary. These guys have been with us from the very beginning, and we are so thankful for having them as a sponsor of the show. Now, Dave, last week,
right,
I had a limerick
for
Hackett, and I think you promised that you were going to write one.
I promised.
In reply.
Yes, I make a lot of empty promises, frankly.
Yeah. So you don't have one?
I do have one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just cranked it out.
Okay, what do we got?
And let me tell you, it shows. You ready?
Yeah.
If you're in some keen need of books, don't buy them from shrewd, outright crooks. The good folks at Hackett have all that you lack it. Make up for your plain, crummy looks.
Very nice. I like that. You just cranked that out.
I just cranked it out.
Man, not bad.
90 seconds of work. Let's take it apart, though.
Okay.
In the interest of selling books for Hackett,
yes,
let's deconstruct this terrible limerick.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. If you're in some keen need of books, it checks out.
Yep.
Don't buy them from shrewd, outright crooks.
Good advice.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have any particular bookseller in mind. I wouldn't call them. But anyway.
No, it's a good thing to avoid, though.
It is hyperbole for the sake of the limerick.
Right.
The good folks at Hackett, well, that works because we say that all the time. Here it goes off the rails. Mm-hmm. Have all that you lack it?
Well, that's very Seussian, right? We all know what you're saying, but you've twisted it in a way that makes it fun and funny.
Really?
Yes.
Lack it? What does that mean?
And we know what you mean, but it doesn't have to make sense.
Okay.
Yeah?
And then the last line is where it really goes off the rails.
Okay.
Make up for your plain, crummy looks.
So you're insulting
I'm insulting the audience. If you buy enough books but you're ugly,
it'll make up for your...
It'll make up for it.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
So maybe a little...
What, do you give me a B- on that?
A little needlessly cruel in the last line.
Needlessly cruel.
Right.
I was under a lot of pressure.
For coming up with that in 30 seconds, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, it doesn't hold a candle to yours last week, let's just say.
Well, thank you. I had more time to
that's true.
To put into it, right.
But what about the listener who wants to buy some books from Hackett, Jeff?
If they go to hackettpublishing.com, you can check out their huge catalog. They have a whole raft of translations from the classics, books on philosophy, books on Asian history, on the Islamic tradition. It's a massive catalog. If you've been listening to the program, you know that we love their translations. We use them. We've been using the Lombardo translation as well as others in talking about Virgil. And so if you want to take advantage of all they have to offer, go to hackettpublishing.com. Find the book that you want, put them in the little satchel. And what's our coupon code?
The coupon code is AN and then the current year, which is, let's see, 2022.
2022. And that will get you two wonderful things. That'll get you 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
And folks, this is the way to make up for your plain crummy looks.
This will do it.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Jeff.
Yeah?
Yes. Just checking if that's still your name. Out in Portland, Oregon, our good friend, the fabulous entrepreneur, decided that there was enough mass-produced coffee, and he said, how can I improve the home coffee-making machine? And he developed the Ratio 8. This is an automatic pour-over machine, which is a beautiful and functional, delivering delicious coffee every day.
Yes, and an elegant package. It's like you alluded to. They are works of art in and of themselves. Now, Dave.
Wait a minute. Do you know why I made that intro so long?
Why?
Because I was afraid you were going to ask me about another limerick.
I suppose, is it too much to ask? Do you have a limerick for this ad as well?
I have one.
All right.
Yes, and this took me a good 75 seconds.
How you feeling about this?
It's awful.
Okay, all right.
Just a moment ago because I remembered, oh no, here you go. I know a swell gal who brews coffee. She serves it with cream, not too frothy. The ratio's her fave. It's brew she doth crave. And for rhyming, I've only got toffee.
So again, in the last line, you kind of throw it away a little bit.
Well, I didn't have enough time.
Right.
Can you rhyme something with coffee and frothy?
Frothy, it's hard, right?
Yes.
Especially under a deadline.
That's right. All I could think of was toffee, and it doesn't really go anywhere.
Right.
I hate toffee, by the way.
I hate toffee too.
Now, I love my grandparents, and one of their favorite, they're both deceased on the one side, one of their favorite candies was toffee. It was an old-fashioned kind of thing.
They always have a little glass dish, right?
Yes, it was wrapped up in that terrible foil you can never get open.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd loved them so much, and they always gave me candy so sweet. And I suffered through a lot of toffee for love of them, but it's not a good flavor.
It's not, exactly. You never said, hey, Grandma, how about some Starburst or some Sprees or something? Right?
No, it's just yeah. There were other kinds of candies, but there was always toffee.
Always toffee, right? But we're talking about ratio, though.
Maybe.
Right? Do you want to break down your poem?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So the first two lines: I know a swell gal who brews coffee. She serves it with cream, not too frothy.
Now, are you thinking of any particular person in mind?
No,
or just
this is generic. Jane Six brew.
Gotcha.
But if the listener is careful, they know that way back when we had another sponsor, we read a couple poems like this, and I have recycled these two lines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you didn't recognize them?
I didn't.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
But I changed the gender to throw the listener off the scent. This time it's a swell gal. The two middle lines, not too bad. The ratio's her fave, right? If you can't get the whole word into the line, cut it up. That
exactly,
works.
right.
It's brew she doth crave. You might wonder, why did I put the doth in there?
Because it's funny.
I was trying to add some, grandeur to it, like Morrell does.
You're trying to raise the tenor
to up the ante.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then, like you said, the last line.
What was it again? I want to hear.
And for rhyming, I've only got toffee. I was trying to think of a way to insult the audience in the last line, like I did in the previous limerick.
Yeah, I gotcha. But I think you insulted all of us with that last line.
So let's say, Jeff, that the listener wants to buy one of these coffee machines, if for no other reason than to end this terrible ad segment. Right. What do they need to do?
Yes, if you want to get the ratio 6 or the ratio 8, you go to ratiocoffee.com. You choose the machine that you want, drop it in the box, and if you use this coupon code ANCO ad nauseum coffee 7B ANCO 7B. That's a code that's good through November 30th.
That's correct. And the B is for brackish?
The B is for brackish, yes. And that will get you 15% off your entire order.
That's right. Check it out.
So, Dave, as we get back into it, we got to go from the flora now to the fauna.
That's right.
All right. So what do we got?
Well, let me read a little bit of Latin. Would that be okay?
Yes.
All right. This goes, Pinguescunt cirvi vulpes ursique lupique, Lynxes et fibri musci lutraque politae, pelibus eximii pratii volu cresque saporis, per placidi variae pellique gruesque palumbes, megillus et fascianus anascignus iovis ales, penelopesque columbae perdix accipitresque. Maybe I can blame Morrell there. That's one of those lines, unless I've messed up terribly, not as smooth as some of the others.
That last one, a bit of a clunker. Yeah.
But the next one comes back in full force.
Okay.
Et capitoli ea ves variae tum carnisipora tum pennis placedete orantibus arta canautas. And that's great. And that's smooth as butter.
That sounds great. Yeah. I like in one of those first lines that you read where it ends Ursuque lupuque.
Yes.
Right. So bears and wolves.
Yes, that's right.
Oh my.
Internal rhyme.
Yeah. That's great.
You want to read us some of Morrell's own translation?
Sure. So let me see. Let me just pick the spot here. So there's grass and herbs contenting man and beast, on which both deer and bears and wolves do feast. Foxes both gray and black, though black I never beheld. Well, how does he know then?
People have told him.
Oh, okay, all
Maybe
right.
the natives.
Okay.
Right.
With muskets and lynx and otter and beaver.
Beaver.
Um,
you were trying to say
Beaver.
because it rhymes with never?
Never. That's a
Yeah, this guy should write limericks.
should.
Toffee.
With many other which I here omit, fit for to warm us and to feed us fit. I
Isn't
like
that nice?
That's great.
Fit for to warm us and to feed us fit. Yeah.
The fowls that in those bays and harbors feed, though in their seasons they do elsewhere breed, are swans and geese, heron, pheasants, duck and crane, culvers and divers all along the main, the turtle, eagle, partridge, and the quail, not plover, pigeons, which do never fail till summer's heat commends them to retire, and winter's cold begets their old desire.
Yeah. Isn't that nice?
That's really nice.
It's really incredible.
It's just kind of that all those names is just kind of rapid fire. I think part of it is to kind of overwhelm you with the variety and,
Absolutely.
and wonder, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It was an enormous and massive still is massive continent. But to these Europeans, they'd never seen anything like this.
Right.
Europe was so old. And apparently, this is what I was told as a kid. Maybe you heard this, that when the Europeans arrived, a squirrel could go from the East Coast all the way to California in treetops.
Oh, without touching the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd never heard that stat. That's
Right.
That's interesting.
I just know that would be one tired squirrel.
But it also it reminds me of Virgil's Georgics.
Right.
But also kind of the sentiment of we have Virgil, imagine him, the kind of the poet in the city, idealizing the countryside.
Right.
But here we have an Oxford man. Here actually out in the countryside
Right.
with his eyes kind of bug-eyed at all that he sees.
Right.
Yep.
And apparently, former member of a failed colony, right?
Yeah.
Wessagusset, I think is what the name of it was.
Didn't even last a year, right?
No,
Yeah.
no. So this is not your kind of an armchair poet, right, in his ivory tower, pontificating about things he's only heard by report.
Right.
This guy's out tramping the woods.
Yes.
Been there.
He's the real deal. Mm-hmm. Right. So I was talking in my class the other day about that the noble savage trope, and a lot of that comes from or is pinned on Alexander the Pope.
Okay.
Which seems to me be the kind of poet of the city that didn't maybe do much tramping out in the wilderness. And so
Right.
I think Morrell has him. He one-ups Pope here is that he's the real deal. Mm-hmm. He's not just kind of imagining these things. He's out there seeing it and talking to people and living it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And he manages to get into his poetry further on. Oysters, crawfish, crab, and lobsters in great abundance when the seas retreat.
So now he's got his pants rolled up. He's wading
right.
out into the brine.
Tortoise and herring, turbot, hack, and bass, with other small fish and fresh bleeding place. The mighty whale doth in these harbors lie, whose oil the careful merchant dear will buy, besides all these and others in this main. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And finishes up with the flora and the fauna.
Yes.
And then starts talking about the natives.
Yes.
Whom he respects and is fascinated by.
You want to take us there?
Yeah, so let's read a little bit of the Latin here, where he's starting to talk about the way they dress, what they wear, some of their habits and customs and so forth.
Okay.
And I'll read a little bit of the Latin, and then we'll get the translation again. So kind of beginning in midstream a little bit. Austeri risusque parum savique superbi, constricto nodis hirsuto, crina sinistro, imparibus formis tondentes, ordina willos, mollia magnanimae peragentes utiagentes, artes sagitifera polentes, crisibus armis.
All right. And he translates thus. Whose hair is cut with greases, yet a lock is left, the left side bound up in a knot. Their males small labor but great pleasure know, who nimbly and expertly draw the bow, trained up to suffer cruel heat and cold, or what attempt soe'er may make them bold, of body straight, tall, strong, mantled in skin, of deer or beaver, with the hair side in. So he's fascinated by these natives.
Unfamiliar dress, unfamiliar appearance. It's quite similar to the way that Herodotus, in his book on the Scythians, right, which I think is maybe book 4 of the histories, he talks about the Scythians, which is modern day Southwest Russia, right, Ukraine, that area kind of, and the way that they're on horseback and they live a nomadic lifestyle. They have unfamiliar dress and unfamiliar customs. I think this probably has to be in the back of Morrell's mind as he's describing strange people he's never encountered.
Right. But at the same time, given what we read earlier too, he's also saying that these are heathens to be converted.
That's true.
At the same time.
Yeah, but I would say in a pretty compassionate way.
Yeah.
I suppose it all comes down to whether you think that converting from one religion to the next, is a legitimate and worthwhile thing,
right? And
if persons should try to persuade others, right?
Right.
This wasn't always persuasion. I mean, I think it was on Morrell's part. There was force used.
Sure.
But Morrell's talking about something a little bit different.
Yeah.
It seems.
It's interesting. I talk about this in my film class. So we talk about the history of the Western in American film, and if you look at the very beginnings of American cinema, some of the very first films were these Westerns, and invariably in these early silent films, you have the cowboys who are the agents of civilization, facing the dangerous frontier, and the natives are the war-whooping savages that need to be tamed, killed or converted.
Right.
And then as you kind of go through the history of cinema up to the present day, that has kind of turned 180 degrees.
Right. It's the opposite.
It's the opposite now, where you see, if you see the cowboys or the colonialists, they are the ones who are the danger.
Right.
And they are intruding upon these golden age figures who just who live close to nature and therefore are inherently moral.
Right, like the famous Kevin Costner film Dances with Stereotypes.
Exactly right. It's a classic example that where his character ends up going native,
right?
Because that's the moral thing to do.
Right.
He leaves behind
the cruel butchery of
exactly
of everything that he represented at the beginning.
Right. You see it all over the place. I mean, that's basically the story of films like Avatar.
Right.
Right. But it seems like
and Avatar 2.
Is that coming out?
Oh yes.
Okay. Yeah.
You haven't bought tickets yet?
No, that's not my thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but more to
yet another movie you haven't seen.
I saw Avatar.
Okay.
And that's why I'm not going to see Avatar 2.
All right.
But to place Morrell into this whole schema, he's more balanced there.
I think so.
Right. So he recognizes the worth and value of the civilization that he comes from, while also kind of admiring the exoticism and kind of inherent purity of these people. They live in that and close to that nature, that multivarious, detailed nature that he just spent all these lines talking about.
Right.
All right, let's pivot over to where he talks about how their society is structured.
Okay, right. And I'm going to read a couple of lines of Latin, and the listener should be aware that one of the really interesting things Morrell does is he describes customs that have no clear equivalent in his vocabulary, using the vocabulary that he has at his disposal. It's kind of the same way that Julius Caesar, right, in De Bello Gallico, is describing all of the tribes that he encountered in France.
Right.
And he's got to use Roman terminology, because that's all he has,
yes,
to describe their various habits. All right. So it goes like this. Rex tenet imperium poenasset praemio cunctis constituit da iurasenes viduasque papillos, et miseros curat peregrinos moliter omnes, excipit hospitio semper tamen inde tributi.
All right.
So I think it's their kingdoms, maybe? Is that?
Their kingdoms, yes.
Okay.
Their kingdoms as their kings of high degrees. Their kings give laws, rewards to those they give, that in good order and high service live. The aged widow and the orphans all their kings maintain, and strangers when they call, they entertain with kind salute, for which in homage they have part of what's most rich.
Very nicely done.
So he's using the language of kings and kingdoms.
That's right.
To describe the chiefs of the tribes and,
right.
How they run things. Yeah.
Whoever the head man was.
Yeah.
And did you catch the Xenia reference there?
Well, I missed it. Where?
Yeah. The aged widow and the orphans all, their kings maintain, and
strangers when they call.
That's right.
Yes.
So Morrell, right, familiar with Xenia from his reading of the Odyssey and many, many other places in Greco-Roman lit, what does he see in this culture?
He sees a similar kind of thing.
That's correct.
Let me just read those last two lines again, because now that you mentioned Xenia, they hit me more closely. They entertain with kind salute, for which in homage they have part of what's most rich. So they strangers come and they give them
the best part.
The best. Yeah.
Right. So when a stranger comes knocking at your door, what's the typical fare?
I'm always suspicious, because I think they're either trying to sell me something,
right,
or they're going to try to sign some kind of petition. Right.
Yeah.
So my house is not very Xenia-ish.
Right. 10, 12 years ago, maybe, when I lived in a different neighborhood,
yeah,
a young man showed up at the door, and asked me for a drink. Appeared like he was selling something, but he just said, "I'm so thirsty. Can I have a drink?" And so I gave the young man a soda.
Did you let him inside? Or did you say, "I'm bringing the soda to the porch"?
I brought it to the door. I was careful, right? I mean, I've got children in the house. It's a complete stranger.
Right.
But it was hot, right? And the guy was going around the neighborhood selling something. Mm-hmm. But when he came to my door, he wasn't selling anything. He just asked for, I'm thirsty. Can I have a drink? And,
right.
So that was very interesting because that's the only time that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And, you read things in the papers, you hear stories about persons, who are kind of exploited for selling stuff.
Yeah.
And I wondered, is this one of those persons?
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I gave him a Sprite.
Well, I mean, you did your Xenia duty there.
You think so?
I think so.
Could I be a native chieftain?
I think much more so than I could, right? What's really interesting about this is, in some of the the stories about the clash between the colonial powers and the native peoples. One of the stories that I've heard is that the colonials take advantage of the docile nature of these tribes.
Right.
They take advantage of this very thing that Morrell is talking about. That come on in. We'll give you the best, and they kind of use that to steamroll them.
Right.
But then also as I was talking about in like those early Hollywood movies, you also get the stereotype of the dangerous savage, right? But I think you always run into a danger when you start talking in generalities and you kind of paint with a broad brush. But I think there is a sense that different native tribes had their own kind of personalities as well, right? So the Apache are remembered as a more warlike tribe.
Oh yeah, heroic.
And or the Iroquois,
right?
And some of these maybe more eastern tribes that the colonials came into contact first were more of kind of the docile kind of agricultural type of tribe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you see that kind of full spectrum here. Mm-hmm. But I think there's probably definitely some truth in that. You hear the story of how Manhattan Island was bought by the Dutch
traded for beads,
for trinkets, right?
Yeah, supposedly
kind of just taking advantage of a people that didn't really know what hand they were being dealt.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we're using very unfamiliar customs.
Yeah.
Right. So can we use this? Well, what are they going to do with it? Right. There wasn't the understanding of what that all entailed.
Exactly.
Exclusion necessarily, and transformation of it into something completely different.
Exactly.
I assume there was no clear understanding of that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's often kind of an aspect that's not often brought into this conversation is this not so much of kind of a sinister exploitation of one side over the other. Definitely some of that, but this idea you have these two cultures that are so radically different.
Right.
When you have these guys from England coming in and talking about notions of private property.
Right. Hundreds of years of detailed contract law.
Exactly. Right. And taxes and ownership and capital and labor.
Right.
These are concepts just completely foreign to these tribal peoples. And
although I assume the concept of property was familiar to tribal peoples, but not in the same way.
Not in the same way. Not in terms of we're gonna draw up and divide up this acreage in these measurements, right?
Right.
But I think that's often kind of an aspect that's often kind of lost in the mix of that conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So as we start to wind down here a little bit, I want to look at just a couple more segments here which characterize some of the society of the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
As presented by Morrell in this brilliant Latin poem.
Yes.
And so I want to pick it up here where he's talking about some of the customs for the very lowest class in this particular Native American society.
Okay.
So I'll read a few lines here which start out like this. Instar servor rum quacunque subire parati ardua concilii subiecti foemina fumus indicus ad certos inhibetur et omnibus annos postea liberior concesse potentia cunctis connubio multas sibi conjunxisse maritas.
All right. And so Morrell's English translation. The lowest people are as servants are, which do themselves for each command prepare. They may not marry nor tobacco use, till certain years, lest they themselves abuse, at which years to each one is granted leave, a wife or two or more for to receive.
So two interesting practices, I guess three. The one is, he says, the lowest people are as servants are. So that's instar servorum in the Latin. They serve in place of slaves, really, or hired help. They can't get married, and they can't use tobacco.
Yeah.
The Latin here is fumus, so smoke is forbidden to them until they reach certain years, so they don't hurt themselves, according to the translation.
For their own good.
Right, lest they themselves abuse. And then, at which years to each one is granted leave. When you reach a certain age, you can take a wife or two or more, right? So polygamy.
Yes.
And what does he go on to say about what this arrangement supposedly entails?
So he says, by having many wives, two things they have. First, children, which before all things to save, they covet, cause by them their kingdoms
Filled, I think it is.
Filled, sorry. Whenas by fate or armies their lives are spilled.
Right. Fascinating, huh?
Okay. It's interesting. He refers to, polygamy here, but doesn't bring in any kind of moral judgment to bear.
No.
Right?
No.
He seems maybe a little shocked that they can't smoke.
Right.
All right.
Until they reach a certain age.
Until they reach a certain age, right?
Right.
So, but I almost anticipates you still have to be, how old do you have to be to buy a pack of cigarettes? I'm not a smoker, but you have to be.
I think it was recently moved to 21.
Is it 21?
I think so.
Okay.
It was raised to the same age as alcohol.
I'm guessing the tribal peoples, you could probably pick up the pipe a bit before 21.
Yeah, I imagine.
Right.
It doesn't seem especially early, but.
So yeah, it's his description. I read it as more kind of it's fascination more than I don't see any kind of condemnation.
Censure?
Here.
No.
Yeah. Right.
No. Well, do we want to fast forward to the end now?
Okay.
I think that probably one episode is pretty much going to cover it, unless we want to go back and focus on, a particular element in the poem, which I find frankly fascinating.
It's really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Because as we've been saying, this gentleman is taking an eyewitness look, using the tools of a very ancient language, borrowing themes and words and expressions from Virgil, Apuleius, Lucretius. The Lucretian homage that I mentioned earlier is the frugiferae, right? The fruit-bearing trees, the frugiferae, frugiferentes. This is a Lucretian neologism, and Morrell finds a way to sneak that in.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's jump to the end. You have a passage in mind?
Yeah. So just basically the last, the last 10 lines or so. Just read a little bit because I think it ends on a really nice note.
All right.
So he says, "Si mea barbara kai prosint conamina genti, si valet Anglicanis in compte placere poesis, et sibi per faciles hac redere gente potentes, acidivos quepios sibi persuadere colonos, si doceat primivi tam victuquam parentis Angli si fuerint indis exempla beati, vivendi capiant quibus ardua limina coeli." And then the last two lines I did not read, but let's take a look at the English translation there.
All right. If these poor lines may win this country love, our kind compassion in the English move, persuade our mighty and renowned state, this poor blind people to commiserate, or painful men to this good land invite, whose holy works these natives may enlight. If heavens grant these to see here built, I trust, an English kingdom from this Indian dust.
Interesting. A mix of things, wouldn't you say?
A mix of things. And even that last line there, a balance, an English kingdom built from the Indian soil.
Yeah. I like the way he says, if my poor lines may win this country love, or kind compassion in the English move. So, although I think that the English, like most of the European colonializers, right, colonizers, went on to do many terrible things, it's not the case that from the beginning all of them had completely wicked motives.
Right.
Here he's saying, I want to move them to compassion and have pity, have mercy, commiserate.
Right.
Come to help this poor blind people. Well, were they poor blind? Maybe in some respects, but certainly not that's not how they saw themselves.
Right. Yeah. And it's also striking, given that we know that he was part of a colony that fell apart,
right,
at least in part due to tensions with the local natives, right? And so here he's still kind of he's saying to his countrymen, take pity,
right?
See them as human,
as persons, yeah. And I love this archaic use of the word painful here, right? Or painful men to this good land invite, which means men that are willing to take pains, right?
Right.
Men that are long suffering.
Yes,
because
exactly.
It's bad here, but if you come here, you can maybe bring some education and build an English kingdom.
Yes. All right.
So you think anybody listening is going to think, oh, these ad nauseum guys, this is just kind of an apology for imperialism. That's what they're saying. They're carrying water for imperialism.
If they listen to the last hour, I don't think they should come away with that at all. Right?
Okay, so what would you say to someone who would say, you guys you're valorizing this poem because you love Latin, but this is a brutal business and you're just kind of glossing over it?
I don't think we glossed over it at all. I think we at many points said that it was the colonial experiment was fraught with highs and lows alike. Right.
Okay.
Right. And to see Morrell positioned in this as someone who's kind of trying to balance both sides in a way that I think is often not brought into that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hats off to Mr. Morrell.
All right.
Yeah.
And for those of you who like this poem, right, you can easily find it, right? In fact, send Jeff or me an email, and I'll be glad to email it to you.
Yeah.
It's in the public domain. That's where I found it. 309 lines of gorgeous Latin and a very serviceable translation by the author himself.
Very good. Hey, we're up against the clock.
Oh, we are.
We got to get out of here.
We got turkey to stuff. We have gravy to stir. What else do we got to do?
We have awful relatives to kind of brace ourselves for.
Oh, come on.
No.
We got pumpkins to pie, cranberries to sauce.
Yeah, did you just use pie as a verb?
I tried to.
Okay, I like that.
All right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to go on.
It is, yes. But in the immediate right now, we got some business to cover,
yes.
right? So before we get out of here, Dave, you want to talk to us about...
Well, I'm still on a vein here.
What?
The moon on the crust of the new fallen pie.
I think you got to let it go.
All right.
You want to tell us a little bit about the Moss method before we go? Okay.
Yeah, coming up, right? This Friday is the fabulous, what you like so much.
Oh, I love this part.
The Black Friday Monsai.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yeah, but I had to switch the last two to make it rhymey.
Well, exactly. I mean, as we saw with your limericks, you're very good at that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So here's what we're offering.
Yeah.
If you want to sign up for the Moss method, you can get 10% off. So the regular $325 comes down to $292.50.
Fantastic.
And this will be open from 11/24, Thursday the 24th, from 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to Monday, November 28th at 11:59 p.m.
Okay.
Shut it down right then.
Okay, so they got a small window.
That small window. It's about, I don't know, it's 5 days maybe. Get in there and get your 10% off. The Moss method for Greek take you from...
neophyte to erudite.
That's correct, right. And if you want to study Latin with me, it's the LLPSI course, Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, latinperdiem.com, and 10% off the $199, so that takes you down to $179. And after this sale, what's the bad news, Jeff?
Well, after the sale, that goes back. The price goes way back up again.
No, not just back up to the original, but it's going above the current price.
Oh, I see.
Because the course is finished. 33 jam-packed videos, tons of information for Latin teachers especially.
Yeah.
If you're teaching from the Orberg book, this is going to give you so much help.
Fantastic.
It's going to go up to $250.
Ah, okay.
So this is your last chance. You better jump in soon, I would say.
Get in. All right. And we got some people to thank.
Yes, we do.
Mishka, as always, our wonderful engineer.
Yes. She's going to turn this one around in record time.
We got to get it out for the
Before
holiday.
you can say green bean casserole, she's going to have this one done.
Thanks, as always, to Scott Vincent and Ken Templin for the great music that you hear throughout the podcast. If you want to one-up Thomas Flynn,
right,
and you want to shout out,
yes,
you want to give us ideas for episodes,
and I got to tell you, that's going to be difficult. Because Mr. Flynn sent us, I think, about 6 pages. No joke.
It is. Yeah, exactly. So you got your work cut out for
That's
it.
right.
Or if you just want to send us a short paragraph.
Yeah, we'd be happy with that.
We'd love to mention your name. Tell us how you're kind of keeping the torch alive.
That's right.
And you can do that to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or send it to Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V. Jeff, did you want to share some of the handy Latin phrases for Thanksgiving you put together?
Let me just give a couple.
These are excellent. I really like these.
So this is for you at the table, and you want to break out some Latin. I thought some Thanksgiving-themed phrases you would see. One would be da mihi garum.
Da mihi garum. What's that?
That could roughly pass the gravy.
Pass the gravy.
Give me, so garum was this awful fish sauce that the Romans
fermented fish sauce.
Put on everything. So
yes.
Give to me the fish sauce. How about this one? You could whisper to the person next to you, quis consobrinum Leonardum invitavit. Who invited cousin Lenny?
That's great.
All right.
That's great.
And then maybe one more here. Nil mihi refert quid nomen eides nulli hic caro, which is roughly, I don't care what you call it. That ain't meat.
That's great. That's good.
And Dave,
Very nice.
You got the gustatory parting shot?
Yeah, but I want to say something else real quick before the gustatory parting shot.
Yep.
That little bit of Latin that you shared with us there so brilliantly, that's like an Easter egg, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How they put Easter eggs in movies.
Yes, I got you.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. It's a pop culture reference, Johnny Pop. And so the people who've been listening to the end, right? Once we get to the end of the content, okay, this is just the typical blather. No. We're rewarding you for hanging in there.
Exactly.
See what you got? All right, now the gustatory parting shot.
Yes.
This comes from Jimmy Fallon, some kind of late night guy.
Yeah, he used to be on SNL.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't not a fan, but I love this quote. A new survey found that 80% of men claim they help cook Thanksgiving dinner, which makes sense when you hear them consider saying, "That smells good," to be helping.
Not bad, Jimmy.
Is that you?
I get in there.
You do?
Exactly.
No, that's me.
I'm a cook, yeah.
Oh, that's me. I come up and say, "Hey, can I help with dinner?" That smells good. That's my contribution.
Excellent. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.